I could not stop picturing Harry Styles. That's my girl. Creepy as hell. God, I wish Kate Eaton were real. If I think about this book for more than 4 minutes, I start crying. Don't revoke my feminist card. It's nothing to write sonnets about. This is literally the best book ever. I don't give a f. Academic Validation Final Boss. Sarah Dessen to Emily Henry Pipeline. Me and who? Laughing so I don't cry. If your first kiss is like that, you're doomed. I watched Challengers and immediately came home and downloaded this book. Worthless Nepo baby. Look at this cover and tell me that's not Pedro Pascal. If the book has a single dad, I'm gonna read it. If you love the song Paper Rings by Taylor Swift, you have to read this book. I've literally never heard anyone talk about this book before. I need Tobias Rhodes. Biblically, these books gave me Stockholm Syndrome. Hi guys, welcome to every book I read in 2024. I think this is my second year in a row doing this video, and it's just so fun to go back and look at every book I read in a year. I read 100 books in 2024, which is crazy. And it was also just a really good reading year. I feel like there weren't a lot of books that I really didn't like, and I found a lot of new all-time favorites. Gonna keep the intro short because 100 books is a lot to talk about. Confession, I actually already filmed this video and I cut down all the footage and it was 2 hours and I was like, okay, that's insane. So we're trying again and I'm gonna go as quickly as possible, just a few sentences for each book. The first book of the year was The Right Move by Liz Tom Ford. The female main character needs somewhere to live, so she ends up moving in with her best friend's brother, who's a professional NBA player. Part of the Windy City series, which is a series I really like. I loved the guy in this, Ryan Shea. If you know, you know. And I did really like them together as a couple. I just think this was a little long, in my opinion. None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. This is a thriller where a successful podcast host meets another woman in a restaurant bathroom and decides to document her journey of her changing her life, and sinister things start happening. Her true colors start coming out. I loved this one. It's one of my favorite thrillers I've ever read. It had me hooked the entire time and I highly recommend the audiobook for this. The audiobook was so well done, and because it's based on a podcast, you get really immersed into it when you're listening to the audiobook. Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. This is accidental pregnancy trope. They're both disabled and they meet at a Halloween party and have a one-night stand, and she ends up pregnant and she ends up moving in with him. If you told me before I read this book, I would have told you I hated the accidental pregnancy trope, and this completely changed my mind. I was obsessed with them and I really liked reading about the disability rep. I thought it was really interesting to read from that perspective. Then I reread Happy Place by Emily Henry. Harriet and Wynne are college sweethearts, but they've recently called off their engagement, except they haven't told any of their friends. So now they have to fake date on their yearly friends trip that they always go on to a beach house in Maine. This is probably my least favorite Emily Henry couple. It's not my favorite romance, but I love Harriet so much. That's my girl. Never Lie by Frida McFadden. This is a thriller where a couple is touring a house and gets snowed in, and they find out that the house actually belongs to a really famous psychologist who recorded all of her sessions, and the main character starts listening to these tapes and trying to uncover this mystery. I have mixed feelings on Frida McFadden, which you'll see in the next book as well. I think her books are easy to read and they are entertaining, but I do think they're just kind of mid. Like, this was just fine, except the plot twist had me gagged. The plot twist did get me, so bonus points for that. And then I also read The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. This one, a woman gets a job as a live-in housemaid and nanny for this rich family in the Hamptons, and she ends up, you know, involved in this family drama, and she stays in this room in the attic that locks from the outside. Creepy as hell. Again, it was fine. It was entertaining. It's nothing to write sonnets about, although this book has stuck with me, specifically that room in the attic. I actually think about it all the time and it's so freaky to me. So again, bonus points for that, but like in general, not the best book ever. Then I reread Life's Too Short by Abby Jimenez. The main character gets custody of her newborn niece, and she also just has a lot of family problems in general and health problems, and the love interest is her next door neighbor who is also a lawyer. So he sort of starts helping her out and helping her with the baby and with her family, and they become really good friends. I love this book so much. It's definitely Abby Jimenez's most underrated book. I don't get why people don't talk about this book more. It's so cute, and just the way he takes care of her. Don't revoke my feminist card, but the way he just will do anything for her and just wants to help her solve all her problems, I don't know. I love it. Low key, I need someone to come do that with my life, and I just love this book. I think it's so cute and so underrated. And then another reread, I reread Heartless by Elsie Silver. This is part of the Chestnut Spring series. Willa is kind of a free spirit, like a firecracker character, and she becomes the live-in nanny for this grumpy rancher single dad. God, I wish Kate Eaton were real. Obsessed with him, obsessed with them. her relationship to his son. Love it. Definitely my favorite in the Chestnut Spring series. Next I read The Boyfriend Candidate by Ashley Winstead. She meets a man at a hotel bar and they get a room and they start hooking up and the fire alarm goes off, and so he ends up Superman carrying her out of the hotel and into the parking lot. And when they get there, people start taking pictures and he basically runs away and is like, I'm sorry, I have to go. And she finds out the next day that he's running for governor, and so they start fake dating because he doesn't want to ruin his image. This is actually the second book in a interconnected standalone series, and I really like both of them. I really like her writing style, I really like the couple, and I really like the political subplots. How to Honeymoon Alone. Her wedding gets called off, but the honeymoon is her dream trip and she planned the whole thing. So she decides to just go alone, and the first night at dinner a stranger sits down next to her because he doesn't want to have to wait for a table, and he's also alone, so they end up spending their vacations together. This book was so fun. Perfect summery vacation book. I loved seeing them go on all their little excursions. Such a fun premise. Cute couple. Had a really good time with this one. Then I read the Improbable Meet Cute series, which is a series of 6 novellas, and they're each written by a different romance author. I did a whole reading vlog on these, so I'm just gonna go through very quickly and give you a yes, no, or maybe. The Exception to the Rule, yes. Worst Wingman Ever, yes. Royal Valentine, maybe. Rosie and the Dreamboat, no. With Any Luck, yes. Drop Cover and Hold On, maybe. Then I did a beach reread. You'll see in this video I read the entire Emily Henry cinematic universe this year, or reread. I just love that woman. If I'm not rereading an Emily Henry book every few months or even weeks, I'm just not myself. So then I reread Beach Read. January goes to spend the summer at her father's beach house. He's recently passed away and she finds out he had this like secret life, and she goes there to clear everything out and sell the house and also write her next book because she's an author, and her neighbor is her college rival Gus. This is literally the best book ever. I don't give a fuck. Yes, it's basic, but it's so good. I love this book so much. It's my favorite Emily Henry book. I love them so much. Then another reread, The Truth About Forever. Another character where she loses her dad, and it's very unexpected and she sees it happen, so she's obviously very affected by this, and instead of grieving, she just becomes hyper focused on being perfect student, straight A's, student council, works at the library, perfect boyfriend, academic validation, final boss. And then she ends up getting a job for the summer at this catering company, and they are a cast of characters, very messy and a little wacky and just real. They're flawed people, as everyone is, and being with them for the summer just really breaks her out of her shell and allows her to actually grieve. There's also a romance, of course. This is one of my favorite books ever. I read this in high school and never looked back. I genuinely have reread this so many times. It's just one of those books for me. It's just such a comfort read. It gives me so much nostalgia. It's one of those books that I've just read so many times that I can picture everything in my head like a movie, and I can just really get lost in this book. I really love it. Perfect young adult coming of age romance, but also leans a little fiction-y. To me, there's a Sarah Dessen to Emily Henry pipeline. They're romances, but the focus is on the main character and her journey first. Although I do love Wes so much. He is one of my all-time book boyfriends. Here we go again. This is a sapphic road trip rom-com. They are ex-childhood best friends who are going on a road trip across the country because their old English teacher, who they both have a really close relationship to and care about very deeply, is dying, and it's his dying wish to live out the last of his days at his beach house in Maine, so they have to drive from the Pacific Northwest to Maine. This was so much fun. It just has so many tropes I love. Travel, forced proximity, enemies to lovers vibes, sapphic romance. It's just a really good time. And also the ending to this book, actually my dream life. Me and Who. Swift and Saddled, which is part of the Rebel Blue Ranch series. It's a cowboy romance series. This one of the brothers that works on the ranch is turning one of the old ranch buildings into a bed and breakfast, and the love interest is the interior designer. I really like Lila Sage's writing in general, and I think the ending of this was cute, but I just really didn't love the build-up, and I also really didn't vibe with the female main character, and this is definitely my least favorite of the series so far. Then I reread Better Than the Movies because I was excited to read Nothing Like the Movies when it came out. I did end up DNFing that, but rereading Better Than the Movies was fun. Rom-com obsessed teen Liz is trying to get a guy to like her, and she decides to enlist her next door neighbor, who is kind of her rival. They don't get along because he's friends with the guy she likes. This is the most YA romance. High school, they're going to parties, they're talking about prom, they're talking about college, basketball games. This book gets a lot of hype, but it is really cute in my opinion. I do like it a lot. One of us is lying, 6 kids go into detention and only 5 come out. I don't know why I said it. I don't know why I said it like that, but one of them does die in detention, and since they were the only ones in the room, they're obviously the main suspects. The premise to this is interesting, but there was, I think, 5 different POVs, and I cared about maybe one of them, and even then, not really that much. I just did not connect to the characters in this really at all, and it just was nothing special in my opinion. Then I read Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. Emma and Justin have the same curse, and it's that every time they date someone, after they break up, they go on to meet the love of their life. I also have this curse. Laughing so I don't cry. Low-key triggering because I also think I have this curse. It's really fun, but they figure if they date and break up, it'll break the curse, and then both of them will go on to meet the loves of their life. Abby Jimenez just doesn't miss. I love her books so much. I love the way she writes, and I love that she has really fun rom-coms, but there's always more serious side plots going on, family dynamics, health issues, things like that. She just balances it so well, and this was no exception. The Fury by Alex Michaelides. A reclusive ex-movie star invites her friend group to her private island in Greece, and tragedy strikes. I did not like this. Honestly, I don't even remember in detail why I didn't like this. I just remember I was not into it, and I didn't like the ending, and also my Goodreads review is literally men with the rolling eyes emoji, and I feel like that's pretty telling. Then I reread The Charm Offensive. He is the latest bachelor, but he ends up falling in love with his male producer instead. Such a fun premise. I love the reality TV show trope. If you feel unlovable, read this book. They are just so understanding of each other and accepting of each other and just wanting to help each other through the things they're going through. They both have different mental health struggles, and the guy who's the bachelor is struggling with his sexuality. They're just so accepting of each other, and it's so beautiful to see. I love them so much. They are so sweet. And I read Listen for the Lie. This is a thriller where the main character and her best friend go to a wedding, and then the next morning the best friend is dead, and they find her wandering around town covered in blood, but she has amnesia, so she has no idea what happened, and there was never enough evidence to find out what happened. And now it's like 5 years later, she's back in town, and they're doing a podcast on the crime, and so she agrees to help the podcast host because she also wants to know what actually happened that night. The main character in this is really funny. Just her whole attitude towards her best friend dying and her not knowing if it was her or not is just so funny. She's so nonchalant about it and just cracks jokes. And I just thought it was really funny and just a different perspective than what you normally get in a thriller. It just was fun. It's still a thriller, so there's obviously a lot of dark stuff to it, but in general it just had a bit of a lighter feel, which I enjoyed. Next was another mystery thriller, The Villa. This one has 2 timelines. It's the same villa in Italy, except the one timeline is in the 70s, where this rock star gets a bunch of people together and they're spending time at this villa, and someone dies, and it becomes really infamous because there were 2 sisters on the trip, and one wrote a book about what happened and one wrote an album inspired by what happened, so it's just become very infamous in pop culture. But what exactly went down, the public doesn't know. So now it's present day, and 2 best friends are also spending the summer at this villa because they're both writers, so it's like a writer's retreat. And the one girl decides that she wants to write her book on what actually happened in the 70s, and she finds the one sister's journal. So you're getting both timelines. I thought this was really fun. Loved the setting. I liked both timelines, but I specifically like the storyline in the 70s a lot. I just love that vibe in anything. I think it's so fun. Also, the like a rock star character, I could not stop picturing Harry Styles, which I never do. I never fan cast him in things, but if they ever make this into a show or a movie, they just have to cast him. I could not get it out of my head. Then I reread Heartstopper. Well, I reread the first 3, I think, and then I read the 4th and 5th for the first time. I talk about Heartstopper all the time, so I'm sorry, but it genuinely is the best. It's so good. Young adult, coming of age, sexuality, great representation, just the best. I wish that I had these books when I was a teenager. They are just something special. Then again, we have an Emily Henry reread. This time I reread Book Lovers. Nora is a workaholic, complete city girl, but her sister convinces her to spend a month in this small town in North Carolina. And when she's there, she runs into her professional acquaintance, but they don't like each other. They had one really bad work lunch a few years ago and just got off on the complete wrong foot. Now they're both in this small town for the summer. I love Nora Stevens. I love Charlie Lastra. I love Sunshine Falls. I love Emily Henry. I love this book. Dare I say her most underrated book? I don't feel like this book gets the flowers it deserves. I love it so much. Wait for it, by Mariana Zapata. She has custody of her 2 nephews and she moves into this new neighborhood, and the love interest is her neighbor who's sort of bad boy coded. I feel like calling a grown man a bad boy is kind of silly, but I don't know how else to describe him. I think he's like a biker and they get off on the wrong foot, but then they become friends, and he's also the nephew's little league coach. I liked this a lot. It has all my favorite Mariana Zapata things in it. She just does neighbor, slow burn, grumpy sunshine, single parent trope so well. It's my second favorite book of hers that I've read. The first is All Roads Lead Here, which will be in this video in a little while. And I read From Lukov with Love, which is another Mariana Zapata book. This is 2 figure skaters and they don't get along. I think he's her friend's brother, so they know each other, but they don't really get along, and they end up having to pair up and become a figure skating team. This was a cute romance. I just think plot wise it could have had a lot more going on. I just felt like it was a lot of telling and not showing, and I was hoping to see them train and go to competitions and travel around, and I just didn't really see any of that, which was disappointing to me. Wild Love. This is Elsie Silver's new series. It's all single dad romances, which if you haven't noticed, I love the single parent trope. It's my favorite, so I was very excited when I heard she was doing this series. This one is Brother's Best Friend. He is a billionaire and he's opening a recording studio in his hometown, and she comes back from the city and ends up working for him, and it's one of those he's had a crush on her like forever type things. This was fine. I think it was cute. I like Elsie Silver's writing. Just not an all-time favorite of mine. Kind of just to me. One thing I really didn't like about this though is their first kiss. If your first kiss is like that, you're doomed. I'm sorry, you're cursed. I was not a fan of that part at all, which I feel like is a pretty big part in a romance book. Reckless, another cowboy romance, also part of the Chestnut Spring series. This one is the sister of the main character in the first book, and they are kind of estranged, but she leaves her husband and calls her sister, and her sister invites her over to a family dinner, and that's where she meets Theo Silva. He's like a family friend. I love Theo Silva. This is accidental pregnancy trope, but like, give it a shot. I think you would still like it even if you don't like that trope, because it's a little bit different. I love them. I love Theo. I loved getting to see Winter and her character development from the first book. Really loved this. My second favorite Chestnut Springs book after Heartless. Then A Funny Story by Emily Henry came out. Obviously I read it immediately. Her fiance realizes that he's in love with his childhood best friend, so him and the childhood best friend get together, and then she ends up living with her ex. So it's both exes of that situation are now living together because she gets kicked out of her house. I liked the characters in this a lot. I always do. I also liked that Miles, the guy in this, has a very different vibe than her other male leads. I think it was fun, and he has Nick Miller energy, which I love. But some of the plot in this book I unfortunately wasn't the biggest fan of, but I still loved it. Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I watched Challengers and immediately came home and downloaded this book. Not exaggerating. Carrie Soto is a retired tennis player, and she has the record for most Grand Slams, but a younger player beats her record, so now she's coming out of retirement to try and get her record back. This is very tennis heavy. I am not a tennis person really, so I personally could have done with a little less tennis, but I did like this, and I thought it had a really interesting discussion on success and what being successful means. Love interest, and both characters in this work for a magazine in New York. It's giving Vogue. It's a magazine, but it also has like an online persona, and he beats her out for a promotion, and she finds out that his dad is on the board, so she just writes him off as a worthless nepo baby. But they end up working together on this project. It's like a video series, so they have to spend a lot of time together. I love Claire Gilmore. I read another Claire Gilmore later in the year. She's the queen of workplace romances. I love her couples so much, and I like that she really commits to the workplace romance. Like, there's workplace in her workplace romances, you know what I mean? And I think they're always really interesting and fun. Same Time Next Summer by Annabelle Monaghan. This is classic summer romance trope where her family has a beach house. He is her neighbor. They grow up together, seeing each other every summer. They get together as teenagers. They break up. It's classic, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I love that trope and I will eat it up every single time. And now it's years later and she's back in town actually to plan her wedding. And he also happens to be back in town. Very fun. Again, I love this trope. I love Annabelle Monahan's writing style. Very solid summer rom-com. Night shift. She has the night shift at the library and he comes in one night to study and that's how they meet. When I read this, I wanted a short college sports romance that I could sit and read in one sitting, and that is what I got. So it scratched the itch that I had, but I'm not exaggerating. They hang out 3 times. These people are strangers. Like they literally hang out 3 times. Just definition of insta love, which I don't like. And also, so when they do hook up, it's like weirdly long. It's such a big portion of the book and the book is so short. Again, it was what I wanted in the moment, so I didn't hate it, but like it wasn't really that good either. The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren. They have a marriage of convenience in college so that they can get affordable housing, but they're basically strangers to each other. They literally meet the day they get married and then they are strictly roommates. They do not spend any time together, and now it's a couple years later and she thinks that they're divorced, but they're actually not, because he comes from a rich family, so there was like some reason, inheritance reason or something, he had to be married for like a certain amount of time, I forget. But now his brother is getting married at this private island and he needs her to go with him because his family thinks that he's married for real. They own a grocery store chain. It's giving Succession, like very rich family with a bunch of siblings, family business vibes. This was so fun. I loved the setting and I liked the characters and I thought they had a cute romance. I just think there could have been more romance. I think his family dynamics really took the forefront and I just wish that I could have seen a little bit more of their relationship. Behind the Net, another sports romance. He's a professional NHL player and he hires a live-in personal assistant, and it turns out that she is a girl that he had a crush on in high school. They were really cute, but it just had a little bit too much smut for my taste, and they also got together a little bit earlier than I like. Then I read This Summer Will Be Different by Carly Fortune. This is past present timelines, and her best friend is from Prince Edward Island, so every year she goes there with her best friend to visit, and the love interest is the best friend's brother. And it's This Summer Will Be Different because they always say this summer is going to be different and they're not going to hook up, but they always do. This took me a while to get into. I really wasn't vibing with it at first, but then once I did get into it, probably halfway through, I did end up really liking it, and I remember it had a lot of quotes that I really liked. A solid summer romance. The Reappearance of Rachel Price by Holly Jackson. This is a YA mystery thriller. Her mom went missing when she was really young, like 2 or 3 I think, and no one knows what happened, and now I think she's 17 or 18 and they're making a documentary about it, and while they're making the documentary her mom reappears. I was not a fan of this. It was 1,000 pages long for no reason. Like, it was so long. There is no world in which this book needed to be over 600 pages. Seriously, for what reason? So even though the premise was interesting, it just gets dragged on for so long. There's also a weird romance that I didn't like at all, and I didn't like the ending, so it wasn't even worth the 600 pages. I just was not a fan of this. Savor. He's a professional chef in New York, but he's kind of going through it because he just got custody of his teenage niece and he moves to a small town in Oregon for the summer because he's helping open a restaurant there, and the love interest is his next door neighbor. Look at this cover and tell me that's not Pedro Pascal. You can't. So obviously bonus points right there. But this was really cute. Really like the small town vibe. They're both helping each other out. She's helping with the niece, he's helping her with this competition thing. Love the cute summer romance. I really enjoyed this. All Roads Lead Here, another reread. This is my favorite Mariana Zapata book. It's become like a yearly reread for me. It's a comfort book now. I just really love it. She's recently divorced and she's moving back to her hometown in Colorado because she needs a fresh start, but she hasn't been there since she was 12 and her mom went missing on a hike. And the love interest is her landlord, who is a grumpy single dad. If the book has a single dad, I'm gonna read it. I'm only human. But this one is so good. It's just something about it I just love so much. It's so comforting. I love the setting. She's like going on hikes and just finding herself, and I love the romance, and she has a really cute relationship with his teenage son. Such a good slow burn, grumpy sunshine. I just love this book so much. I need Tobias Rhodes. Biblically, it's not funny. I need him so bad. Summer Romance by Annabelle Monahan. A single mom. Guys, take a shot every time I say single parent, single dad, or single mom. I need to find out the percentage of what books I read were single parent trope, because making this video I feel like it was actually all of them. Anyway, she's a single mom, pretty recently divorced, and she gets into a relationship with this man who's only supposed to be there for the summer. Again, classic. but in a good way. Again, I love Annabelle Monaghan. I love her writing style. I thought the couple in this was so cute. I liked seeing her trying to find herself again, and he is just the sweetest man ever. I feel like I would have a crush on him in real life, and his relationship to her kids, very sweet. This is definitely my favorite Annabelle Monaghan book so far. Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. She's a total commitment phobe, and they meet on a dating app, and they meet up at this hotel, and they're supposed to just hook up, no strings attached, and then something happens that they don't end up hooking up. He ends up just taking her home, but they do have a nice little connection. And then the next day at work, she finds out that he's part of a group that's trying to buy the company that she works for. So even though professionally she hates him, they end up being friends with benefits. I did not think I was gonna like this that much because the friends with benefits trope is not really my favorite, but I should not have doubted my girl Ali Hazelwood because I loved this. I was afraid that their connection was gonna feel purely physical, but that was not the case at all. I thought they had a really strong connection, and I really liked them together. And it also had Ali Hazelwood's just classic STEM workplace vibe, which I just love. The Ministry of Time. She works in the Ministry of Expats. The expats are people from the future, so they're basically trying to see if time travel is viable and survivable. So she gets paired up with a Victorian naval officer, and she is living with him and helping him acclimate. This book is so unique. It's a mix of different genres. It's so interesting how they go about time travel and having them acclimate, and it feels realistic. Like, if time travel did exist, this is what it would be like for someone to come from the past. And I just thought it was all really interesting. I think this had the potential to be really bad, but I thought it was really good. You Should Be So Lucky. This is a gay historical romance between a reporter and a professional baseball player in 1950s New York. This book is everything. It's so good. One of my favorites of the year, hands down. It talks a lot about grief. It talks a lot about queerness. It's romantic. It's just if I think about this book for more than 4 minutes, I start crying. Like, genuinely, something about this book has just affected me so deeply. I'm so emotionally attached to it. It was so incredibly good. Could not recommend it enough. I have never annotated a book as much as I annotated this book. Love Unwritten by Lauren Asher. This is a nanny trope. He's having trouble connecting with his son, and she's helping him, and they go on this trip to Hawaii. I think I could have loved this. I thought I was going to, because on paper it sounds like something I would love. It's full of tropes I really enjoy, but it was so long. Literally, this could have been, in my opinion, 250 pages shorter. Like, this is 600 pages, I think, for no reason. It just did not need to be that long, and because it was dragged out so much, I didn't like it. Like, I just was so over it because it was so long that I just was like, I don't even care about them anymore, which makes me sad because I was really excited for this. I just think it should have been way shorter. Nora Goes Off Script. This is another Annabelle Monaghan. She's a screenwriter, and she writes a movie based on her divorce, and they are turning that script into a movie, and they film it at her house, and the love interest is the male lead in the film that's playing her ex-husband, and he's kind of going through it, so he asks if he can stay at her house for the summer. She has like a guest house, and that's where he's living. She's a single mom, of course. Of course, single parent trope, aren't they all? And this was cute. I like Annabelle Monaghan's writing, like I've said, so I enjoyed this. I just think the third act breakup, and then the whole last third of the book, just where they have the conflict, and then, you know, they're apart, whatever, they get back together, it just felt so dramatic, and it didn't equal the relationship that they had to me. Like, a 6-week fling, no offense, just did not equal the level of dramatics that the end had. So this was not my favorite. It's my least favorite Annabelle Monaghan so far, unfortunately, but it still was cute. Like, I didn't hate it. I just didn't fully vibe with it. Caught Up. This was a reread for me. This is also part of the Windy City series. This one is guys, I'm sorry. The amount of single parent trope books I read is actually insane. I didn't realize how bad my addiction was until this moment, filming this video. He's an MLB player, he's a single dad, and he needs a nanny, and so his coach offers up his daughter to be his nanny because she is on a break from being a professional pastry chef. This book is so fun. I love both the characters. I love the man in this. She has the cutest little relationship with his son, and I like the baseball aspect of it. I think it's fun seeing them go to games and practices. I love it. Fun sports romance, that's also single parent trope. And then I also read Play Along, which is another book in this series, and this is his brother from Caught Up. I love the Rose brothers, what can I say? He's also an MLB player. They play on the same team, and he drunkenly marries his athletic trainer in Vegas, and they end up having to fake date and just pretend their marriage was legit. This was so fun. Again, I loved the baseball aspect. They're really cute together. He is obsessed with her, rightfully so, and I love it. She's like strong, badass, female main character energy, and he knows it, and he's been obsessed with her for years, and he knows her worth, which I love. Next is the single dad cowboy romance. Dust Storm, she, again, like city girl classic. I know these tropes are so cliche, but I just love them, so I don't care. She's a city girl, like corporate, I forget exactly what her job is, but she comes to the ranch to consult for them because they want to expand and improve their business. And of course, something happens where now she has to live in his house with him and his kids. His oldest brother runs the ranch vibe again. They're all the same. He is a Cade Eaton variant, so obviously I loved him. If you like those tropes, you will probably like this. Not an all-time favorite of mine. It's kind of forgettable, but I did enjoy it in the moment. And then the second book in the series, Downpour, is his brother, who is paralyzed from a rodeo accident, and the love interest is his home health aide. This was also cute. I appreciated reading the disability rep. I just didn't fully connect with these characters, and I just didn't really buy their romance as much. Again, not a bad time. I love a cowboy romance, so I was satisfied, just not a favorite. The Ex-Vows, their exes and their best friends are getting married, but everything in the wedding goes to shit, so now they have to come together and plan their friend's entire wedding basically in a week at this vineyard in Northern California. This is second chance romance done right, in my opinion. I think sometimes that can be a little bit tricky, but I fully understood why they broke up, but she also fully explains how in the years that they've been apart, they have grown and changed, and how that leads them to being able to get back together. And I think that's tougher than it sounds in a second chance romance, but it just felt very realistic to me, and I really bought their relationship and how they could have broken up and then come back together. Also, if you love the song Paper Rings by Taylor Swift, you have to read this book. Alive and Wells. Okay, I was fully in my cowboy romance era at this point. I'm pretty sure this is when Twisters came out, and I already loved a cowboy romance before this, but then it just really ignited that in me. So the next is Alive and Wells. The main character in this has an abusive husband, and she's in this chat room for domestic violence survivors, and she befriends this woman on there, and the woman says, if you ever do get out, come here, I can give you a job and a place to stay. So she does. She leaves her husband, she shows up, and it ends up being this ranch, and the love interest is oldest brother running the ranch. Again, good. I had fun reading it. Not an all-time favorite, but if you love cowboy romances like I do, you will probably enjoy this. And I really liked the abusive ex-husband plot. I feel like that's not something I read too much of, and it was an interesting perspective to read from. Then the sequel to this book is Seeing Red. This is an accidental pregnancy trope. He's one of the guys that works on the ranch. He's like a family friend, cousin type to the brothers. When you see this couple together, they are very cute. But this book has so much smut, and I know a lot of people love that, so if you do love a really smutty romance, you would love this, honestly. But that's just not my favorite. I don't love when a book has a ton of smut, and this has a lot. It's like every other chapter, and it's not just like a little scene. Like the entire chapter will be smut, and that's just not my personal preference, so I didn't really love this one. Then I was having The Summer I Turned Pretty withdrawals, so I read We'll Always Have Summer. This is the third book in that series. I read the other ones, I don't know, a while ago, and I just never got to this one, but I did read these books like a million years ago. I think high school, maybe middle school, I don't know, but I couldn't remember exactly what happened, and not having the TV show, I missed them so much, and I wanted to know what happened, so I read the book. Jenny Han, genuinely, I love you so much. Like, I'm a stan. These books in general just aren't that good, really. I'm sorry. I feel like if you took me back in time to middle school or high school when I did read these, I would love them, but just as an adult, I feel like they don't really hold up. And I normally never say this, but I feel like you could just watch the TV show for these. The God of the Woods, this is another mystery thriller. It centers around this old money family that has this big property in the Adirondack Mountains that includes a summer camp. And I think it was the 70s, their son is attending the summer camp and goes missing. And now it's like 16 years later, and their daughter is going to the summer camp, and she also goes missing. I thought this book was so well done. It follows a lot of different POVs and timelines, and I just thought the author did a really good job of melding them all together. It's not the kind of thriller that's gonna have you on the edge of your seat biting your fingernails. It's more of a slow burn, but I really liked seeing everything slowly come together, and I thought the end was worth it. Ready Player One, this is set in a dystopian future, which funnily enough is only like 20 years from now, which I fear is a little too realistic. But basically the world has gone to shit, so now everybody lives in virtual reality, and the guy who invented this virtual reality and who controls it dies, and he makes a competition competition, and the winner of the competition gets all of his money and all of his power, and you're following an 18-year-old who's trying to win the contest. It's all 80s themed because that's the decade that the inventor was a teenager. I love this book. This is another book that is one of my favorites. I reread it frequently. It's just so fun and I just get sucked in every single time. I feel like it's so immersive. This is one of my go-tos when I'm in a reading slump. I just know that I'm gonna get hooked and sucked in, and it's just so much fun always. Then stay with me, okay? I read It Ends With Us because the movie was coming out and curiosity got the best of me, okay? I did read this quite a few years ago and I just wanted to know how it would hold up. So I reread it. Honestly, it's not that bad. I don't know if it's just because my expectations were literally in the dumpster and I thought I was gonna absolutely hate this, that I was pleasantly surprised, but it's really not that bad. Like, is it incredible Nobel Prize winning literature? No, not at all, but it's fine. It's okay. Then I couldn't help myself and I read It Starts With Us because, again, the curiosity just got the best of me. I think if you love Lily and Atlas, definitely read this. It's cute to see them get their little happily ever after, but you're also really not missing much if you skip this. Then I read Ready or Not by Cara Bastone. This is another accidental pregnancy trope. In this one, she has a one-night stand with a bartender, but he's actually not the love interest. The love interest in this is her best friend's brother. This did not click with me. I really don't know why. I don't remember and I didn't write it down. Normally during every month I'll write down notes for every book I read to help me during my wrap-ups, and I guess for this month I didn't. So I don't remember exactly why this didn't vibe with me. I remember I thought the main character was funny, but I think the love interest just didn't really do it for me, and like the plot was just like I don't know. I just know that this was not my favorite. Daydream by Hannah Grace. This is part of the Maple Hill series, which is a series I really like. It's nerdy girl athlete trope. She's tutoring him because he's struggling in a class. I loved these characters a lot. I saw myself in each one of them in different ways and I was really connected to them as people, but the plot of this book just didn't do it for me. They get together so early and then it just feels like they're dating the entire book even though they're technically not. And it's like, why can't you just date? Like, you already are dating. Even if you can't admit it, you're dating. So I just didn't really understand like what we were doing here. Just date. It's gonna be fine. Wild Eyes. This is the sequel to Wild Love, part of that same series. The female main character in this is a really famous country singer and she comes to the recording studio that they were setting up in the first book, but she comes early and so it's not ready yet and she has to, you guessed it, stay with the girl's brother on his property, and he's a single dad. I'm getting embarrassed, honestly. She kind of had to grow on me because she's very just sort of spoiled, rich girl, famous, you know the vibe in the beginning, but she did really grow on me and I liked them together and I liked him. I thought his kids were really cute and her little relationship to his kids, and I ended up really enjoying this. I enjoyed it a little bit more than the first one. Then I read The Thursday Murder Club. This is set at a retirement village and every Thursday they get together and try and solve cold cases, but then when someone involved in the retirement community dies, they decide to investigate that case as well. This, at least from what I saw, I thought that this was a cozy mystery. And in my opinion, I didn't think it was. It had a different vibe than I was expecting. This book just has so much going on, so many characters, so many different plot lines. I found myself very confused, honestly, and because of that, I didn't think the ending was satisfying because I was like, what is even going on? And I also didn't really vibe with any of the characters. There was one character I thought was really interesting and I thought they were going somewhere with that storyline and then they didn't. So this was just very unsatisfying to me. I'll get back to you. This is a sapphic holiday romance. It takes place over Thanksgiving weekend. They went to high school together and they see each other at Blackout Wednesday and they decide to fake date because the main character, Murphy, is failing a class, and it turns out the professor of that class is the other girl's mom, so she's trying to smooth her way into getting a better grade, and then the other girl doesn't want to have to go home alone for Thanksgiving, so they fake date. Murphy is literally me. I've talked about this before, but she is so similar to me and where I was in life / where I am in life. Like, we're like this. So for that, I really liked it because I saw myself so much in her. But the romance does sort of take a back seat. I wish I could have seen a little bit more of the romance. What you do see is cute. I just think there could have been a little bit more. The Last Word. Okay. This book is batshit crazy. Like, it's wild. I think you're either gonna love it or you're gonna hate it. She's house sitting on this remote beach in Washington State. The only other person around her for miles is her next door neighbor, and she reads an ebook and she hates it, so she rates it 1 star, and the author reaches out to her about her 1-star review, and then after weird stuff starts happening. Would this ever happen in real life? No, like, it's insane. But I thought it was a lot of fun. I was on the edge of my seat. I was scared. I had to put it down because I was reading it at night. I was getting freaked out. Like, it gave me the feelings I wanted, and I thought it was fun and entertaining, so I liked it. Then I read Sunshine. I love this book so much. So underrated. I've literally never heard anyone talk about this book before, and you guys need to get with the program because it's so good. I don't want to tell you anything about the plot because it's so much better if you just go in blind, but it's small town romance, past, present timelines, cowboy, Friday Night Lights. So romantic. I was literally squealing, giggling, kicking my feet, blushing. I had a full body reaction, but also will make you cry. It is just so good. I could not recommend it enough. Then I reread Fourth Wing. This was another book where I wanted to reread it before the sequel came out, and then I DNF'd the sequel. So let me know if I should finish Iron Flame. I just could not get through it. I read like 30% and just was struggling. Anyway, Fourth Wing, it's sort of like Divergent with dragons. She's a student at a war college for dragon riders. I think this book is fun. I know a lot of people hate on this book, and honestly, I completely get it. It's a popcorn book. It's not winning the Nobel Peace Prize, but I think it's really fun. They have an enemies to lovers romance going on. The dragons are fun. In my opinion, it's a good time. Then I listened to Two Can Play by Ali Hazelwood. This is an audio only novella that she wrote. They work for rival video game companies, but both companies want to make a game together, and so they go on this company bonding retreat at this ski resort, and the two main characters don't get along because he said something about her behind her back years ago. This was just fine. I'm not a novella person in general most of the time, so keep that in mind. They're usually not my favorite. I really don't have strong feelings on this really either way. Like, I didn't absolutely hate it, but I also didn't particularly like it. I don't know, it's a very just like middle of the road. I don't really have feelings about it, but I'm so sorry, Ali Hazelwood, because I do love you so much. Then I reread The Hunger Games. I feel like I can't go one video without mentioning The Hunger Games, so I'm sorry, but I did reread The Hunger Games. They're my favorite books ever in the world. Nothing will ever top them. It's a yearly reread at this point, minimum, sometimes even more. This was October I read them, and I already want to reread them before Sunrise on the Reaping comes out. It's an addiction. Then I read Metal Slinger by Rachel Snyder. In this book, there are the Kenta and the Alaha, and the Alaha are banished from land, except for one day a year they can go to this market. So the main character goes to the market for the first time, and something happens that puts their peace treaty at risk, and then one of the Kenta shows up the next day, and it goes from there. That's only like 10% of the plot. So much more happens. This book is so good. I'm obsessed. I have not stopped thinking about it since I read it. This, as you'll see, put me in a romantasy era. I never was a big romantasy person before until I read this, and I was like, oh, I get it. I get the romantasy girlies now because I ate that up. That was so good. Just twists, turns, always something going on. The ending has the biggest plot twist ever. It's actually insane. The sequel is set to come out for this in 2025, and I cannot wait to reread it before the sequel comes out, and I cannot wait to find out what happens because I am telling you, it's insane. Then, like I said, I had to enter my romantasy era, so I read the Powerless series, everything that's out so far. In the powerless world, there are people with powers and people who are powerless. She's powerless, but she pretends like she has powers, and she ends up in this competition full of trials with the prince. Was this entertaining? Yes. It was easy to read. It was fun. However, she rips off The Hunger Games completely. Like, actually copy and paste. She also kind of rips off Goblet of Fire, and from what I've heard, completely rips off Red Queen. I have not read that, so I can't attest, but I did read a plot summary, and it does sound exactly the same, and I just like cannot support that. I think I gave it 3 stars when I read it, but as time goes on and I think about it, I get more annoyed. Like, she really ripped them off, guys. Like, it's bad. It's really bad. There's also a novella that is like a spin-off of the main character's best friend, and it takes place during the first book. That was okay. If you love the series, obviously read it, but you're not really missing that much, honestly, if you skip it. And then I read the second one, Reckless. This book could have been literally 50 pages. It was so dragged out for no reason. Nothing happens. The entire plot of this book is what I thought was gonna happen in the first like 10%, and then more stuff was gonna happen, but she just drags it out for the entire book for no reason. Except of course the last literally 5 pages. She hooked me, so now I have to read the 3rd one, which is so annoying because I don't even necessarily want to, but like I have to find out what happens at this point, even though the books really aren't that good. Then I read Heartless Hunter, another romantasy. This one is Witch and Witch Hunter. She's a witch vigilante and he is the captain of the guard that hunts witches, and so he's trying to court her to try and figure out if it's her, and she knows that he's onto her, so she's trying to throw him off her trail. I was obsessed with this book. Just everything about it. The romance I loved, just the setting and the ambiance was just so up my alley, and it was one of those books that I could just picture in my head like a movie. I thought the magic system was interesting, just the tension, and like they're both playing each other but they're both falling for each other. I loved this so much. The sequel comes out soon and I am so excited. And I read A Binding 13 and Keeping 13. This is technically 2 books, but it's basically one really long book. It doesn't feel like 2 books, so I'm just gonna talk about it sort of like it's one book because it basically is. Shannon has never had a good day in her entire life. I'm not exaggerating, that poor girl. She has a terrible home life, abusive dad, terrible. She gets extremely bullied at school, like very badly. She has a horrible life. So finally she gets sent to a different school, a private school, where she meets Johnny, and he is the rugby. Is it rugby? Is it rugby or is it yeah, it's rugby. So he's a star rugby player. Everyone is against their relationship. No one wants them to be together. It's this whole thing. I feel like these books gave me Stockholm syndrome. Like, they're not that good and they're so long. I think they're a combined 1,200 pages, 1,200 pages. They do not need to be that long at all. But because they're so long, you get so emotionally invested that I had to find out what happens. And the ending is satisfying when you see like everything play out. It's extremely sad. Like, these books are very depressing. The payoff is there. It's just, I don't know. I have very mixed feelings on these books. Like, they're not that good, but I also couldn't put them down and did read all of them. So joke's on me, I guess. Then I read A Perfect Fit by Claire Gilmore. This is another workplace romance. She has a fashion company and she hires a consultant, and the consultant that shows up is her ex-best friend's twin brother, and in high school they all had this big falling out, so she hasn't seen him in like 10 years. Again, I love Claire Gilmore's writing. I'm always really rooting for her couples. I really like them, and I really like the way she does workplace romances because she really makes it a part of the story, and I always think it's interesting. Then I read Lost and Lassoed, another book in the Rebel Blue Ranch series. This one is single dad, oldest brother working on the ranch, live-in nanny trope. So obviously I loved it. Lila Sage's books for the most part are very just fun, short, easy to read. This one had a little bit more emotion and a little bit more angst, and because of that I really liked it. This is my favorite of the series so far. And then I also went and reread the first book in the series, which is Done and Dusted. This one is more lighthearted, short, a little more lusty, still really cute, and I like it, but a little bit of a different vibe than Lost and Lassoed. She's coming back to town to recover from a riding accident, and the love interest is her brother's best friend. Then I read Lights Out. This is my first dark romance. This book is insane, but in the best way. He makes mask thirst traps on TikTok, and she's obsessed with him, and she comments on all his videos, and he finds out who she is in real life and sees all her comments, and her comment is literally like, I wish I could come home and like have you on the couch. She literally says, I wish you would break into my house, and so he does. He's like, bet, on my way. So he breaks into her house, plants cameras, and then stalks her. I did not think I was gonna like this at all, but I actually ate it up and loved it. I thought it was so much fun. I didn't love the last third of this book. I don't think it was necessary, and it just got a little too outlandish for my taste, but overall I still had a really good time. The next 2 are both Audible original audio only novellas by Cara Bastone, Call Me Maybe and Seatmate. These are really fun because they are like 90% dialogue, so you really feel like you're listening to these people fall in love in real time. Call Me Maybe is, she is a business owner and she's having problems with her website, so she calls the customer service line of the website company, and the love interest is the guy who answers the phone from the company. Very cute. And then Seatmate is, they sit next to each other on a bus from Boston to New York. I was obsessed with this literally from the first second where they're like, hi, is the seat taken? I just was eating it up. This one is even more dialogue than Call Me Maybe. It's literally like 98% dialogue, and it was just so fun to sit there and listen to them talk in real time and fall in love. You feel like you're sitting next to them on the bus and listening to them talk. It was so fun. If you like audiobooks, I would recommend both of those. Then I read From Blood and Ash, another romantasy. She's the maiden, which means she's getting raised as a sacrifice to the gods, and she's very isolated. No one can see her face besides her guards. Like, no one can interact with her. She can't have any friends. Very isolated. She is just there to one day be of service to the gods, and the love interest is her bodyguard. I thought the premise of this was really interesting. It was a fun little romantasy, and I really liked Hawk, the love interest, a lot. Then I read 2 of the Under the Mistletoe novellas. This is similar to the Valentine's Day novellas, except they did some for Christmas. Cruel Winter with You by Ali Hazelwood, I really liked. I would have read a full-length book of them. I really liked them a lot. And then All by My Elf, which I hated, and I gave 1 star. I said this in my wrap-up, so I'm repeating myself, but there is literally a scene in this book where they're cuddling and she feels something. She's like, oh, what's that? He goes, oh, sorry, I have M&Ms in my pocket. She's like, oh, it must have been the M&Ms I felt. You're 37 years old. What? This was the cringiest book I've ever read. I'm gonna do the romantasies I read in December first, and then I'll do the Christmas books. So if you don't care about the Christmas book, you can just click out. But I also read The Serpent and the Wings of Night. In this book, it's vampires and humans, but the humans are sort of like the peasants of this world, like the lower class, and the vampires rule. And she's a human, but she was adopted by the king of the vampires when she was a kid. Now she's entering these trials with the vampires so she can become more powerful. This took me a while to get into, but once I was into it, oh, I was into it. This was so good. The romance was amazing, but also just the politics of this world and the trials was just very interesting to me. I feel like a lot of times in romantasy, I care more for the romance than the actual like plot and world, but in this one I really liked both of them, and I just I loved this. There's also a novella that goes with this. It's completely different characters, but the characters in this novella I believe are in the sequel to The Serpent and the Wings of Night, so I read it in between. Also good, would recommend if you're reading the series. Totally different vibe. This takes place on the human continent where it's just humans and he's just a random vampire that lives there, but she needs his help because her town is dying. Also really good, really liked it. Very excited to see those characters in the second Serpent and the Wings of Night book. Okay, now we're in the home stretch. The only books left are Christmas romances because obviously it was December. I love Christmas and I love romance, so I had to. The first one was Make the Season Bright by Ashley Herring Blake. This is a sapphic holiday romance. They were best friends growing up and then like high school sweethearts, and the one girl left the other girl at the altar. Now it's a few years later. They both go home with their friends for Christmas, and their friends are sisters, so now they have to spend Christmas together at this house. Took me a little while to get into this one too, and I do feel like leaving someone at the altar is brutal. I don't know if I could get over that personally, but I did grow to really like them, and I did think the ending was really cute. Then I read The Most Wonderful Crime of the Year. This is Christmas romance meets Knives Out. I love the movie Knives Out, so this was such a fun premise to me. As soon as I saw this, I knew I wanted to read it. They're both authors and they get invited on this mysterious trip to this random house, and they get there and it turns out that the house belongs to a really prolific mystery writer. She's written like 99 books. Agatha Christie vibes, and she goes missing. So now they're trying to figure out what went on. It's also a romance. This was so much fun. I think if you like that type of whodunit story and you want a little Christmas romance, this is perfect. And then last but not least, we have The Holiday Honeymoon Switch. They are 2 best friends and they also look alike. The one friend gets broken up with the day before her wedding, and the other best friend is an artist and she has a trip planned just to get away and do her art. And so what happens is that the friend is supposed to go on the honeymoon since it's paid for, and the girl that was supposed to be on her honeymoon is gonna go to New York in a cabin. So it's kind of like The Holiday, except if the girls in The Holiday were best friends. This was fun. I liked both storylines. I liked both romances. I love The Holiday, so that sort of trope was really fun. I don't think it's my favorite romance ever in the world, but I did really like it, and if you're looking for a Christmas romance, I think this is a good one. Also fun because the honeymoon is Hawaii, so you're getting like a beachy, summery book while also having a Christmas romance where she's like snowed in upstate New York. So I thought that was really fun. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you made it to the end, I love you. Please let me know what your favorite book of 2024 was. I would love nothing more than to add it to my already endless TBR. If you want to find me anywhere else, I'll have all my other social medias down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.